For this week's lesson, we're going to be drawing a futuristic cityscape using one-point perspective. Now, the big idea is things are going to look smaller as they get farther away from us. So this road is basically a triangle that comes to a point at the vanishing point. The sidewalk is a triangle that comes to a point at the vanishing point, just with horizontal lines to break up the sidewalk squares. But each square is getting smaller and smaller to show that it's getting farther and farther away. When I'm drawing a building, I start with the simple form, like a rectangle for the side, and then I draw guidelines from the corners to the vanishing point, and then a vertical connecting line parallel to the other connecting lines. The connecting lines are lines that connect two guidelines. The guidelines are angled towards the vanishing point, and you can see I've got vertical connecting lines on the walls and the windows to connect the different guidelines that angle towards the vanishing point. So again, I start with the simple shape, like the rectangle for the front of it, guidelines from the corners to the vanishing point. And on this one, something seems missing from that. Since that's above the vanishing point, it means I'm looking up at it. I would see the bottom of that rectangular form, almost like it's hovering above that building. I'm going to draw another smaller rectangular form to sort of connect those two pieces. So it becomes a little bit more of an irregular shaped building, or part of it seems like it's scooped out near the top. I can draw another road. A road going from side to side is just a pair of parallel lines, but a road going off in the distance is going to be like a triangle that comes to a point at the vanishing point. Now, throughout all of this, I'm really just drawing different forms, and I draw guidelines from the corners to the vanishing point. The thing that confuses some students is figuring out which corners to draw from towards the vanishing point. And a sort of good rule of thumb is if a line would have to go through another shape in order to reach the vanishing point, I usually don't have to draw it because it means it's behind something else. I'm creating a sense of space not only through proportion, but also through the overlapping of things. So having a wall in front of something else helps to create a sense of near and far as well. So the overlapping is another strategy that's happening in here, because in a real city we have things that are in front and things that are behind. With a cylinder or something like that, I'm not really drawing the guidelines. I'm just keeping in mind that on the cylinder at the bottom left, I see the top of it because it is below the vanishing point, meaning I'm looking down at it. And for the sort of flying saucer that's up at the top, I'm looking up at it, which means I see that oval or ellipse at the bottom of the form. You can add all sorts of different designs, create your own unique styled buildings. They could be simple rectangles, or they could be really elaborate polygons, and you can even have organic shapes if you want. It gets a little bit harder when you have curved walls. I think of it like parallel curves. They're sort of curving the same way to connect the guidelines, but it's all basically the same idea. You start off with the simple shape for the front of it, draw guidelines from the corners to the vanishing point, and then parallel connecting lines. Now, after I've drawn my basic buildings, I'm going to want to make sure that I add windows and doors and other details. The more I add to this, the more elaborate it becomes, the more realistic it becomes in some ways, but also it gives you opportunities to put a little bit of quirky accents, like the way that I put flying saucer with somebody being sucked up into the tractor beam. And thinking about those unique and unexpected details gives your work a little bit of personality. It makes it stand out. So I would be creative and have fun with it. You could make robots walking around the streets. Maybe you don't have streets. Maybe you're just going to have teleportation stations all around. Whatever stuff you want to add, totally up to you. You can imagine a city 10,000 years in the future, and maybe it's all floating in outer space, and it's stations with different rockets going all over the place. Whatever you want is fine, but I do want to see you using a vanishing point consistently on there. I'm using the strategy, like I said before, of overlapping. But now as I'm adding color, you can see I'm not only adding color, I'm also adding value. One of the things I like about crayons is I can layer, I can blend colors, and I can also shade by just varying the pressure on the crayon by pressing harder in some areas and being more gentle in other areas. So you'll notice the front walls of my buildings I made a little bit lighter, and the side walls along the road I made a little bit darker to create that effect of almost like a highlight and shadow. And that's another thing that starts to add a little bit of dimension to my piece. That's going to make it a little bit more realistic in some ways. Even though I'm not totally going for realism here, it's more sort of whimsical and cartoonish. Applying those different elements in that way will add a little bit more to your drawing and will make it a little bit more engaging and a little bit more polished, even if it's unreal, even if it is fantasy. Now, one other strategy you might consider, as I finished mine up, I used a black crayon, not only to color the road for obvious reasons, but I used a black crayon to outline. And the main reason that I outlined in this video is because it helps to make everything stand out. It makes it more visible. Outlining things is sort of a double-edged thing. On the one hand, when you outline things, it makes it pop. It pulls it forward in the picture plane. It makes it stand out. It makes it more visible. On the other hand, when you outline everything, especially consistently with the same weight of line on every single line, the way that I'm doing in here, it also makes it a little flatter and more cartoonish. Now that works for my particular style because it is meant to be a little bit whimsical and cartoonish. But that is something you would want to consider. Do you want the outlines or do you want it to be more realistic? And if you want it more realistic, you want it probably a little bit more subtle. Maybe your city is going to be in a bubble dome at the bottom of the ocean. Maybe it's going to be on another planet. Maybe it's going to be on no planet at all, just floating in space. You can have total freedom with this, but make sure you're using that vanishing point consistently to create a sense of space. And think about applying the other strategies we talked about, such as overlapping and shading, and thinking about how all of those elements can come together and all those different strategies can work together to make a stronger picture.